The April 17 meeting of the Board of Directors of JEA will come to order. I'd like to ask everyone to stand for a moment of reflection, followed by a pledge to the flag. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated. We've had an agenda published. I'd like to ask a motion for adoption of the agenda.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Second by Reverend Newbill. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
I'd like to acknowledge that Director April Green is participating by telephone. Can you hear me, Ms. Green?
Yes, I can.
Thank you. Ms. Green, you can keep us on mute. That'd be fine.
Okay.
Thank you. Ms. Green is traveling and is currently in an airport. Next is our safety briefing, Interim CEO Ms. Dykes.
Safety is a core value at JEA, and so we begin each meeting with a safety briefing. In case of emergency, Ted Hobson has volunteered to call security and 911. Mike Brost has volunteered to perform CPR if that's needed. In the event of an evacuation, please help your neighbor to exit our building safely. The stairs are to the left of the elevator. Please hold the handrail while descending and proceed to the open parking lot at the southeast corner of Main and Church Street. And please silence your cell phones for the meeting. And that concludes our safety briefing.
Thank you, Ms. Dykes. I'll turn to our Chief Legal Officer, Jody Brooks, for the Sunshine Law and Public Records Statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a duly noticed public meeting of the JEA Board. Quorum is present in the room with one member on the telephone. Minutes will be taken, and so we're in proper order to proceed. Thank you.
Thank you. This time I'd like to recognize comments from the public. I'll ask each of the speakers to please come to the podium, give their name and address, and limit their remarks to 3 minutes. First, Andy Johnson. Mr. Johnson? After him will be Randy Hilton. Good morning, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate you giving me a moment. Once upon a time, I represented half of Jacksonville in the legislature, and at that time, the JEA had a very big problem. Roy Sloughs and Tom Welch and Leon Green came to me and told us about their plan for the joint venture that saved Jacksonville. That joint venture was the best public works project ever built in the state of Florida. It came in under budget, it came in under time, and it was a source of tremendous stability and reliability and affordability for electricity that gave Jacksonville a chance to grow and prosper over the last 30 years. I invested a lot of energy in that project. I invested a lot of energy in the JEA. I haven't been to a JEA board meeting probably in 20 or 30 years. But back at that time, I would crawl around on the floor of the House of Representatives to tug on the jacket of other members to try to get them to pay attention and to do what Leon Green and Tom Welch said that Royce wanted us to do. Whatever Royce said, I tried to get it worked out. It was complicated. It was difficult. I've invested too much energy in the JEA to see it go to hell. For 30 years, I've watched the JEA carry on a proud tradition of professionalism, of expertise, of leadership, seeking affordability for Jacksonville, seeking prosperity for Jacksonville. But now I worry that the JEA is no longer committed to the professionalism I've seen in the past. There are rumors now that you may decide to hire a board member to be your executive director. That would be a terrible thing to do, a terrible precedent to set for other agencies in Jacksonville. That should never happen. The best plan is to hire from within. If you're not going to hire from within, then at least hire somebody from within the utility industry. I object to anybody as the executive director of the JEA who does not have prior experience as a professional in the electric utility business. This is important. For the JEA to restore confidence in the JEA, which is gone. The confidence in the JEA that we've had for 30 years is destroyed over the last few months. For us to restore that confidence, another part of the plan has got to be that the JEA, in a forceful and dramatic way, makes an open statement to all of America that the JEA, by golly ding dang, the Jacksonville Electric Authority, is not for sale for any price. We've got to have the Jacksonville Electric Authority make that clear, or else we're going to be consumed in scandals and corruption and baloney and tomfoolery for the next year. I urge the JEA to make a big stand, very clear stand about this. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I appreciate your comments. I appreciate your past service to our community and our state and your continued interest in JEA. I can assure you that this board has nothing but professionalism at its core and will expect nothing less from its senior leadership. Next is Mr. Hilton. After him will be Jason Baber.
Good afternoon. My name is Randy Hilton. I'm the president of the Professional Employees Association here at JEA. The Professional Employees Association is a group of about 300 employees within JEA, 100 engineers with various engineering trades, 100 IT professionals, and 100 data analysts and accountants. The PEA has served JEA for about 30 years in partnership as an association. We have one of the most highly talented, educated, and trained per capita work groups in the city of Jacksonville, as do the trades and the other unions in JEA. The PEA has contributed significantly to the leadership of JEA over the last 30 years. We've had many members, presidents go on to be the CEO of this company and to be vice presidents of this company. We certainly don't want to minimize the depth of the bench that resides within JEA. And that's certainly true with the PEA as well as with all other areas of JEA. There's no shortage in JEA of highly capable and talented folks that can lead this company. Not to marginalize or minimize a broader search. You always want to get the best. But at the same time, for those that may not understand, we do have the capability within. So we certainly hope that the board takes that into consideration. As for the search process, we believe it should reflect the public ownership and open government nature of JEA and not be rushed or hurried. All potential candidates should be publicly vetted prior to any final board selection. There's no rush. This company is going to operate. It's going to operate at a high level. You guys don't need to rush on this. Get it right. Last, we stand ready to participate with any discussions, providing comments, and we look forward to the future with an open mind. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Hilton. We appreciate the service of you and the fellow members of PEA, all the great work that you guys do. As former CEO and Managing Director Paul McElroy was fond of saying, there are a lot of utilities out there that deliver electricity, water, and other services. What makes JEA different is its employees. So thank you. We appreciate that. Mr. Baber, and after that, Lisa Weatherby. Mr. Baber?
Good morning, Jason Baber. My address is on file. I'm Vice President of the Professional Employees Association, electrical engineer here. What does JEA stand for? Anyone who's been here more than a month can tell you it does not stand for the Jacksonville Electric Authority. It also doesn't represent the mayor or his donors and political allies. It doesn't represent a revenue piggy bank for the city coffers or the contractors that get to build the political pet projects. It doesn't even stand for the employees. Who does it stand for? It stands for it represents the people outside the window that work and live here in our service territory, inside and outside of Jacksonville. It stands for the ratepayers that buy our services, including water, sewer, and gas. The problem right now is that all of the people on this side of this table don't think that those of you on that side of the table remember that, or maybe even took it into account to begin with. We all think this is a giant game being played right now by a few people, and they're using you as pieces on the board. The people that JEA stands for and represents are starting to sit up and notice the game. They're starting to pay attention to what's going on in this building and in City Hall. They will see the decisions you make here today, and they will see the game being played and the pieces moving against their best interests. Right now, I challenge you to think about what JEA represents and what part you had to play in it. People will remember.
Thank you, Mr. Baber. I respectfully disagree with your comments, but I appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us today. Lisa Weatherby. After Ms. Weatherby, we'll have Wayne Dunn. Morning, Ms. Weatherby.
Good afternoon.
Oh, thank you.
My name's Lisa Weatherby. My address is on file. I'm probably the only person in town with a cold in the month of April, but I come from a little bit different perspective, which is as a former board member, 3 years and 9 months, former vice chair and chair-elect. And I just want to say what an amazing talent we have with Melissa Dykes. Excuse me, sorry. And I was in the unique position when we were interviewing for a CFO. And long story short, she was a standout rock star. And I also remember being at the meetings with the rating agencies in New York. And I think Melissa had been hired for a few days, a week maybe. And she got up in front of the rating agencies and just knocked the cover off the ball. And we were all, she doesn't know this, but our mouths just dropped. We were just like, holy cow, how'd she do that? And we also got very good ratings that year from the rating agencies. And so my perspective is a little different. I think we have incredible talent within. And I think that now that she has almost 6 years in the C-suite, she's even more incredible as a potential leader to be CEO of JEA. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Weatherby. Appreciate your comments, and thank you for supporting the hiring of Melissa Dykes. She's been a home run for JEA. We can all agree on that. Next, Wayne Dunn. Mr. Dunn?
I believe my address is on file as well. I just wanted to spend a minute on the sale of JEA. And I've been involved in a company we took public where we acquired a franchise territory. One of the things that the seller did that was rather prudent was they developed a pro forma on us, the buyer. And in the course of that evaluation, they were able to shrewdly negotiate an effective price that represented what we would do when we acquired their territory. You know, lay off employees, restructure assets, and other, such things. I'd recommend that JEA do something similar. Develop a pro forma on behalf of a potential buyer and look at it from that perspective. Edison Electric publish investor-owned utility pro forma on some 49 IOUs, and they saw recently some 17 rate cases. And their average was like 9.5% out of a requested 10.33%. They're looking at a regulatory lag against Treasury yields. Treasury yields we now anticipate will be climbing. As those climb, then those ROEs, return on equities, will increase. Florida Power and Light's rate case is currently before the Florida Supreme Court in appeal. The appeal is against a rate of 10.55%. So I think that it would be very prudent for us to try to examine what is JEA's current effective return on equity, and then what would change should a purchaser try to achieve a return on equity consistent with that which they are providing for their shareholders now. Is that, my rule of thumb calculations looks like about double. But I don't know, right? I've reviewed some of the financial information, but not at a level of detail. And there's a lot of question regarding what our asset strength is and what those asset values are, which fundamentally are at the core of a return on equity calculation. Regardless, it's possible to do this, and I strongly recommend that. You consider undertaking such a pro forma and deciding what would it be? Would they spend $10 billion on JEA and look to recover $1 billion a year? Is that double what we're doing now? How many employees do they have per unit customer versus how many employees we have? Would that be about a 60% reduction in employees? Those kinds of things. So that's, in a nutshell, that's my recommendation, is we look at this from the perspective of the buyer.
Thank you, Mr. Dunn. I appreciate your comments. A bit premature. This board isn't considering a sale of JEA at this time, and I'd invite you to share your thoughts and comments with City Council and other stakeholders. Thank you. Well, you're always welcome here. We'll turn now to comments from our council liaison, the Honorable Matt Schellenberg. Ms. Schellenberg?
Thank you very much, Chair, for recognizing me, but I want to recognize at least one of my colleagues at City Council, Greg Anderson, and he's here to listen in on the board meeting.
Our former council liaison. Councilman Anderson, welcome. I don't see Dr. Gaffney. Was there anyone else from the mayor's office? No? Then we have on the agenda recognition of certain JEA employees. Ms. Stewart, did you want to introduce these? Who's the introduction for our JEA
I
employees?
believe that's
Oh,
me,
it's
Mr.
you.
Chairman. Yes.
Your name wasn't attached.
Forgive that. Mr. Chairman, a lineman rodeo competition is the Super Bowl for linemen. At the state competition for the Florida Municipal Electric Association last month, more than 130 line workers participated from Florida, Georgia, and Colorado. For weeks before this competition, JEA linemen and apprentices compete against each other to even have the honor of making the JEA team. So it's my very great pleasure at this board meeting today to introduce Andy Yeager and ask him to come up to the podium. Andy is our manager of electric systems construction and maintenance, and Andy is going to tell the board more about this great honor.
Looks like he could do a rodeo too.
First of all, I'd like to say thank you for the great opportunity to come before you and brag on our guys a little bit. Before I get started with my presentation, I'd like to just show a real quick video if we could, and then I'll get into it.
Sure.
What does it take to win a lineman competition? For starters, competitors need to be athletic and execute things like a 15 kW switch replacement quickly and perfectly. After that, they must be adaptable because the rules change every year.
This year, before we start tooling up, we got to wear our leather gloves, where in the previous years, you always start with your bare hands on.
JEA's journeyman team of Robert Hess, Brian Gregg, and Greg Johnson beat teams from across the country to win the 18th annual Florida Lineman Competition in Kissimmee. This team performed each event perfectly and with the best overall time and score. It's not the first time JEA has taken home top honors.
That was us in 13 and us in 16 also, so makes number 3.
Perhaps the best thing about a lineman competition is that getting there fosters teamwork.
We all pretty much help each other and competed a little bit in the training yard. And some of the other guys, even though they didn't play, they was right there with us in the training yard practicing. And we learned stuff from them. They learned stuff from us, some of the stuff we used to win.
From here, JEA's competition team travels to Wake Forest, North Carolina for a competition organized by the American Public Power Association. Oh, have I mentioned? We've won that competition too. I'm Brian Pippin.
At this time, I'd like to introduce some of the teams, and as they come, we'll also introduce, they'll be bringing some of the hardware that they won, and we'll give some of their accomplishments. But as they come, I'd just like to say, not only are these guys great employees for JEA, but when they're on that field in the rodeo, these guys are rock stars. They have a following of different companies that come around and try to imitate everything they do, try to figure out the things that JEA's figured out, because JEA is always at the top of the rung, always number one. So, there's an old saying, often imitated but never duplicated. Well, that's our guys. So they're always getting imitated, trying to be like them, but they can never do it. They can never duplicate us. The first team we're going to introduce is the team of Cody Stokes, Davey Hicken, and Miles Hendricks. As these guys come, I'll just give you a few accomplishments that they had this year. This year, they ended up being second place in the vertical hurt man with a time of 1 minute and 14 seconds. If you're not familiar with what the hurt man is where they simulate an energized circuit. They have to go up, before they can go up the pole, they have to have a person run up a 40-foot stick. And if you've ever seen a 40-foot fiberglass stick blowing in the wind, it blows pretty good. So that guy has to pull that out. They have to run up the pole, tie the person off, and let them down to the ground. They was able to do this in 1 minute and 14 seconds, which is incredible. They also received 4th place in the bell changeout and did a fine job throughout the day, and we appreciate their efforts. Thanks, guys.
Hey, guys. Congratulations. Appreciate it. Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Absolutely. Y'all stay up here.
I think we'll get a group photo with all of you at the end.
Go ahead, Mr. Yeager.
Yes, sir. The next team is the team of Robert Hess, Greg Johnson, and Brian Gregg, and you saw them in the video, a lot in the video talking, and I'll ask them to step forward. And as they come, they have a long list of accomplishments, so I'll go ahead and bring them up. They received first place in the bell changeout. They received first place in the pole transfer event. They received first place in the mystery event. And the mystery event is an event that we have no idea what it is until we get there. The guys, they're not able to practice for it. They're not able to know what's going on until they get there, and they have to figure out what's the best way to do it and the quickest way to do it and the safest way to do it. They also received third place in the vertical hurt man with a time of 1 minute and 23 seconds. And their most prized accomplishment was they received first place overall. Of all the teams that were there, they received first place overall.
You guys want to get a photo?
We still got one more, sir.
One more?
Yes, sir.
Holy cow.
Yeah, we don't just stop here. The next one is one of our apprentices. He's not made it to the journeyman level yet. His name is Jeremy Starr, and if Jeremy, you'll step forward, please. Jeremy received second place in the written exam, which is a comprehensive exam of many, many books that they have to go over and study. And there was nobody that received a perfect score. First place missed 2, and Jeremy missed 3. So he was right there at the very top. Jeremy Starr. Probably the most impressive of all these is each one of these guys has participated in rodeo events before, but neither one of these teams has ever participated together. This was the first year that they participated together as teams, and they was able to accomplish all this, so it's quite a feat. And it brings the name of JEA in good standings as they go out representing us.
Sure does. Thank you, Mr. Yeager. One more round of applause.
Angle that way a little bit. That way, that way, that way, that way, that way. Yeah, go on the other side. There you go, there you go.
Sorry, Valerie.
It's okay. Good. All right, I can see y'all. Good. Good.
Congratulations.
Can the media run that on the front page instead?
Would be nice. I don't want that one.
Thank you, Mr. Yeager.
Also, while we were at the rodeo, JEA received a couple of plaques, and I'd like to present them to the board. The first plaque that we received was the safety plaque. And it's a safe work, recognizing our safe work practices, and it says, FMAA presents the 2017 Safety Award of Special Recognition to JEA.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
We also have one more plaque that JEA won. Let me get it out here. And this, I'll just read the plaque real quick. It says, in recognition for the Restoring Communities Award. It says, in recognition of the extraordinary efforts and dedication provided by the Florida Municipal Electric Utilities who help to restore power to communities in emergency situations, presented this day of March 2018 to JEA.
Thank you. Was that it?
No. Only in the beginning. Last but certainly not least, the guys take great pride in designing shirts every year to wear in the rodeo. And this year was our design of our shirt was a picture of the American flag with a lineman on it. And this actually won the #1 shirt at the rodeo. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Yeager, and thank you to all the linemen. You guys make JEA proud, and I'll just say that I understand that there are hours and hours of practice that go into this, and it's not just a competition, it's setting an example. And all that hard work pays off in the fact that you guys do an outstanding job in the field every single day and are really an example to all your other linemen and linemen all over the country. And we appreciate you, and you make us proud. Thank you. Thank you very much. Okay, I think that we're up to the consent agenda. If I could have a motion for approval of the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Is there a second? Thank you, Reverend Newbill. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, that passes. Is Ms. Green still with us?
Yes.
Thank you. So we're on
Yes,
to
I'm still
item
here.
3B, strategic discussions. I'll call on Ms. Dykes to make a presentation as to our annual disclosure reports.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will quickly review the two items that are behind tab 3B under the strategic discussion in order to facilitate keeping on time with the agenda. The first is the annual disclosure reports. This is a follow-up item to the information that was presented last month. There are a few pieces of information that have been updated since last month's meeting, and you'll find those pieces of information in the folder that's been distributed ahead of the meeting. The changes primarily relate to certain personnel changes, including Mr. McElroy's resignation and Mr. Zahn's resignation from the JEA board. We have updated some interest rate swap valuation numbers and included some updated numbers related to hurricane costs in those reports. The only remaining piece of information that will be updated before these reports are provided to our investors is the outcome of the discussion that's later on the board agenda for this meeting relating to the interim CEO of JEA. Otherwise, with these changes, these are presented in near final form for the board's approval today.
Does anyone have any questions about this before we call for a motion? Have an opportunity to review the red lines showing the changes from the draft presented at the last board meeting. Let me call for a motion then for approval, and then we'll have further discussion. Motion for approval of the annual disclosures.
So moved.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Is there a second? Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Mr. Cumber.
Through the chair, Ms. Dykes, could you walk us through where Plant Vogel is discussed in the annual disclosure, and whether the only thing I see in it is just a reference that we have no ownership interest in any nuclear power plant, but we do have a PPA, but no reference to anything else besides that.
There is an extensive discussion of Plant Vogel within the body of the annual disclosure report, and I'm a little bit at a loss since I've only brought the redlined pages with me to this meeting today, but I would be happy to follow up with you to point out where that is in the annual disclosure report if that's helpful.
I think it's important for the board to review that, just given all the noise around it. So I am a little concerned of approving an annual disclosure report that we are not, I see the red line, I know it's in our book, but there's nothing necessarily in Plant Vogel before us right now. So-
It is before us to the extent that we have previously distributed at last month's meeting, the disclosure report. So it was distributed. This is the red line.
No, I understand that.
Do we have a deadline on approval for the disclosure report?
We do, it's June 1st.
June 1st. So if you would like, because it's a June 1 deadline, we can defer action without consequence until the May meeting.
We can.
Would that be your preference?
Let's do that, so we could at least, all of us on the board, at least, I think it would be important to pay attention to that section.
Yeah. No, any objection? I'll ask for withdrawal of the motion.
So withdrawn.
Friendly? Okay, so the motion's withdrawn. We'll table that until the May meeting.
Great, and then could we just have that section circulated?
Of course.
Just, thanks.
Okay. Anything else on disclosure reports to be noted other than the Vogel discussion, which we postponed?
No, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. So then the operational and financial review, Ms. Dykes.
I will offer a concise, compressed review of the operational financial information that's included in the board packages in scorecard format. We continue to focus on safety as a core value at JEA. Our safety performance is running behind our goal for this year, and that will continue to be one of our highest priorities to make sure that we look out for each other and keep each other safe. With respect to the remainder of the operational metrics that are flagged in either yellow or red on these scorecards, those are items that have been discussed at previous board meetings, and there are no more current updates to offer with respect to those items. In the electric system, the water and sewer system, and within customer experience. Flipping to the last page of the report on page 5, there are 3 circles that are in yellow here. These are our cost metrics for the year. We continue to keep a focus on our cost performance. We do have a couple of items that are driving these numbers up for the year, but that's going to be something that we focus on and strive to achieve through the remainder of the fiscal year. And that concludes the scorecard report for this meeting.
Questions on the scorecard? Ms. Flanagan?
None at this time.
Mr. Cumber?
I'm good, thank you.
Reverend Newville? And Ms. Green, I don't want to ignore you. I'm not sure the opportunity if you've had to review the electronic materials. Did you have a question on the operational report?
I do have the materials, and I don't have any questions at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Green. Ms. Dykes, I had one question. The red dot on page 3 regarding electric outage duration, is that a timing issue given where we are, or we expect that to survive as a red?
That's driven up this year primarily due to weather events that have affected the electric system. However, Mike Frost gave a presentation about 3 months ago to the board that talked about this being a key focus in terms of improving operational performance and the ways that we're going to address this in the electric system. One of the key ways that we can address it is through getting better data from the meters themselves in the system and getting better data from sensors that are installed throughout the system to allow us to pinpoint the exact place of an outage and type of outage to better attack the restoration of outage, which will improve duration.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Ms. Dykes before we move on? Okay, then we're up to old business. Any old business to come before the board? I have one question for Ms. Dykes, and I apologize for not asking you this previously, and feel free to yield to Ms. Kilgo or someone else. Where are we with City Council on the dark fiber resolution passed by the board at our last meeting?
I may need to draw on Ms. Kilgo to provide a comment on whether or not that's yet been introduced at council.
Sorry, Ms. Kilgo, I did not give you a heads up on that. It just occurred to me somewhat belatedly. Proceed forthwith. Thank you, Ms. Kilga. Okay, so the moment everybody's been waiting for, we'll move to new business. Ms. Hires, CEO search. I believe when we last met, we asked that you look into engaging a search firm.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and other board members. At your direction, we have commenced the exploration and consideration of an executive search firm to assist us in the search for our CEO at JEA. And I would like to present just a few key items for the board to consider as you wish to move forward with this process. I've spoken with a number of firms, and those firms were ones that we've done business with before. There were some firms that were recommended by our peer group that we've reached out to, and there are also firms that I have personally done business with in my 30-year career in human resources. As I had the conversations with some of the firms, there were some consistent themes that emerged during those conversations. One of the themes that constantly emerged was their concern to be able to provide a quality slate of candidates given the heightened awareness and sensitivity around the privatization conversation. As a matter of fact, I even had one firm to decline to accept an RFQ if we were to present one to them, meaning that they would not like to participate in the process if we were to move forward with soliciting them. And I will tell you that was probably one of the few times in my life I have been rendered speechless. I have never had a firm to decline business of that nature and at that level, considering the fee structures that most firms have regarding this type of search. Another concern that seemed to have emerged, and we will seek clarity if we should move forward with a solicitation for an executive search firm, is what type of CEO will we be seeking? Would we seek a CEO to lead a transition, or would we seek a CEO to build a long-term strategy here at JEA? JEA currently has a 3-year contract with the executive search firm ZRG Partners. We entered into this agreement with ZRG last spring because they emerged as number one when we went through this type of solicitation process before. The contractual agreement that we currently have with ZRG has an $80,000 cap, and then plus any expenses that we might incur based upon the travel that they might have with any candidates and the travel that might occur because of the recruiter that's assigned to us. One of the things that I did want to point out about that cap of $80,000, it is normally customary with other firms from a 30% of the first year's compensation and total compensation, including incentive, up to 1/3 of the first year's compensation of the selected candidate would be the cost or the fee if we use other firms. So that $80,000 cap is a considerable economic advantage. One of the things that we should also consider as we move forward with this conversation, that if we were not to use ZRG, which is the firm that we currently have a contract with, we would be able to go through an informal solicitation. We would be able to do that under the procurement code because based upon what we would expect the salary to be, and given the fact that most of the fees tend to be between 30% or up to 1/3 of the first year's annual compensation, that would probably put us in a ballpark of about $160,000. We would be under that $300,000 cap in order to do the informal solicitation. However, one of the things that we would have to be concerned about in doing the informal solicitation, that could take us up to 60 days just to go through that portion of the process, meaning we would have to post the RFQ, we would have to get responses back from those participants, we would have to put together an evaluation team, which would be the team to go through those RFQs to make sure they met the criteria. And then after that, we would subsequently go through the recruiting process. During normal times, and I say normal times, given the conversations that I have had with recruiters, I would expect a recruitment such as this to take anywhere from 90 to 120 days. But given those conversations, we may be looking at a longer period. However, if we were to utilize the current contract that we have in place with ZRG Partners, as soon as the board would give approval, we would be able to commence that recruitment as soon as possible, even so far as I'm connecting with them on tomorrow. So we do look for the board for direction as to how we should proceed with the recruitment.
Thank you for that report, Ms. Hires. Let me try and bullet point back what I think I've heard you say. We have a current contract with ZRG
Yes.
that was awarded the last time you did an RFQ to search firms, and they came out on top. Okay. And that was only a year ago?
Yes, that was.
And we have availability under that contract, and it would be an $80,000 fee payable to them for this search?
Yes, that's correct.
And comparable firms, we could expect to be at least twice that much?
Yes,
Or
and
approximately
then
twice that
some,
much.
yes.
And if we wanted to go with other firms and go through the RFQ process, that's going to add 30 to 60 days to our timeline.
Yes.
Are you recommending we go with ZRG?
Yes, I would recommend that we go with ZRG.
Good, I was hoping you were recommending that.
Yes, I would. I would do that for a couple of reasons. First of all, they have a wonderful reputation in our industry. They specialize in the utility industry. The recruiter that would be assigned to us, she has helped us with recruitments before in another firm. She also helped us with an executive search here at JEA, and she is ready to go.
I'm going to ask for a motion to engage ZRG just so we can engage in open discussion on this point. May I have a motion?
So moved.
I have a motion to engage ZRG for the CEO search. Is there a second? Don't let it die for lack of a second. Second? No second? You can vote against it later.
No, understood. I guess I feel like I'm out of order right now on on the discussion, so,
You have questions?
yeah.
Yeah, let's get a motion on the
Second.
floor. Second, thank you. Now, Mr. Cumber, questions?
So if we were to vote on this right now, to engage ZRG, I think our head of HR, Angie, brought up a great point, which is, what are we looking for? Right, so how do you engage a search firm when we haven't had a discussion as a board as to what type of CEO we're looking for?
I think it's entirely appropriate during the discussion on this motion to give them parameters.
But I'm giving parameters to a firm that I have, for the first time in my life, just heard of.
Fair enough. You want to talk about other candidates? Other firms?
I don't. I'd like a little more background on this firm just to get comfortable with them.
Do you have that information available, Ms. Hires?
I don't have their bio here at the table, but ZRG is an international firm. They have offices all over the world. We work with the Dallas firm. We work directly with the recruiter, Leslie Sharp. Leslie Sharp has been the recruiter that was assigned to us also under Pring and Associates.
Yeah, look, I have no doubt that they're a firm. I just, if this was the motion that was going to come up today in the recommendation, I don't know why we weren't at least given 24, 48 hours to at least read about the firm and then come in and vote for it.
Well,
So-
in fairness, she had 1 week to go out and talk to the firms.
Understood, but that's my comment.
Talk to me about ZRG's ranking when you last did a solicitation, Ms. Hires, and what led to them being ranked number 1 at that time.
They were ranked number 1 because, first of all, of their reputation in the community in which they work. We also got references from other people who they served. The recruiter that's assigned to us, Leslie Sharp, she was with another firm. She had gone to work for ZRG. Leslie had led us through a number of other recruitments, and it's also because of the quality of candidates which she was able to attract, and also because of the way that she had worked with us on previous recruitments. Then the second thing is cost. I mean, they have a $80,000 cap, which is absolutely phenomenal because you don't often see that when you're working with firms. As I mentioned before, you'll see anywhere from 30% up to 1/3 of the first year's compensation. And that's one of the things is that we have been taught to be fiscally responsible.
Ms. Flanagan.
If I may, through the chair, under the existing agreement with ZRG, is there a current guarantee that we owe to them regardless of whether or not we select them in this search, or have the parameters of the economics merely just already been decided should we move forward with them?
No, we have no obligation to use them.
Reverend Newbill.
Yes, sir. The 80,000 and the 1/3. I know you said 80,000, and then there would be some other costs.
Yes, that's up to $10,000 for travel expenses, and that would be for lodging, for any cost associated with bringing candidates here to Jacksonville to interview for the position, if those candidates were outside of Jacksonville, and then for any travel for the recruiter, because in the past recruitments that we've done at the executive level, the recruiter that was assigned to us did come to meet with the committee that was actually conducting the recruitment in order to make sure that everything was in order prior to proceeding with the recruitment itself.
Okay. So the other companies, the 1/3, would that include those pieces, or?
No, that 1/3 is basically a percentage of that overall total compensation, which would include that base salary as well as any incentive compensation.
So the 80,000 and the 1/3 is apples to apples?
Yes.
Okay.
They would both be plus.
Right.
Can you, just for the benefit of the record and those who haven't worked with executive search firms in the past, summarize what the search firm actually does for the client in connection with an executive search?
Basically, what the executive search firm would do with us is they would pretty much handle the entire recruitment for us, as far as making sure that they're reaching out to candidates that would actually fit the profile based upon our criteria. They would vet the candidates for us, and by vetting, I would mean that they would actually reach out to candidates for us, handle the application process, retain all the records that we're required to obtain as far as applications are concerned, schedule interviews, handle all of the logistics, and provide us with a place, time for us to meet with the candidates, discuss the candidates with us, make the offers for us, and pretty much just expedite that process as quickly as they can based upon the direction that we provide to them. So basically, it's a one-stop shop. The only thing that we would be required to do is to give them direction at the beginning and then participate in the interview process. But everything else they will handle for us.
Yes, Reverend Newberg.
Will there be opportunity for anyone else outside of the ones that they pick to apply?
Well, if we have recommendations for someone that we would like to submit or have them submit their resumes or application to the search firm, we are at liberty to do that.
Questions about ZRG and their capabilities? Because I also want to discuss the direction to any search firm in keeping with Mr. Cumber's concern. Questions about ZRG's capabilities? Ms. Flanagan.
If I may, would you happen to have the stats or figures in terms of volume of CEOs in general and CEOs within the utility industry that they have placed in the last 5 years?
Okay. I don't have that information with me right here, but I can provide you with that information.
Okay.
Okay.
Do you have a sense for their experience in the utility sector?
Yes, they are very well versed in the utility sector. As a matter of fact, the person that they have heading up their utility recruiting efforts actually is from the utility industry and actually served in a senior level capacity. And she was actually brought in to build that practice years ago.
Have they done any placements for us, for JEA, under their contract with us?
Well, the recruiter herself, she came from another company, and she actually placed Monica Whiting, who was our chief customer officer, and she also placed our chief legal officer and our chief public affairs officer. Not you, Judge. we wish.
Other questions? Mr. Cumber?
So, so have you drafted a scope to give them that we could review?
Well, I've started to put a draft together, and that was basically just getting out the last CEO draft that we put together when we did the CEO search back in 2012. So we have that template, but I did not want to send them anything until I was assured that we were going to move forward with a search for a CEO through a informal solicitation process. But when we are prepared to move forward with that, I'll sit down with parties that the chair so directs me to for us to put that together. I don't put that together by myself.
Understood. I just didn't know if you had a draft for us. And you had mentioned you had spoken to several firms, and they all had different kind of timelines that they were sharing with you. Can you walk us through what they believe the timeline would be?
I have been given timelines anywhere from 120 days up through 8 months. And some firms, they say that one of the things that they're concerned about, again, is bringing some clarity around exactly what we're looking for. I think once that's defined, we may be able to speed that process up just a little bit. But again, that concern is being able to sort of get through some of the challenges of the privatization conversation.
And have you talked to them about what that's going to inform our next discussion, right? So I'm trying to understand how long they need in order to feel comfortable they could place someone, assuming we've given them direction, we've told them what the job description is, we've told them, the type of individual that we're looking for. Would they expect to have somebody before us in 6 months, 9 months, 12 months?
Most of them have given me a time frame between 6 to 8 months.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Reverend Newberg.
if that's the case, somewhere I read 90 days, wouldn't we have to extend the period of time for the interim
For an interim
in
CEO?
order to facilitate
Yeah, I think that's a related question to the follow-up of choosing a search firm and then hiring an interim CEO, because they will interact with one another, right? CEO, and there is a draft contract attached to the agenda. It is just that, it's a template. There's no salary in there, there's no name in there. It does have a term, but I would suggest to you that that term could also have been left blank. I don't think there's any decision that this board has made about the length of time for an interim CEO. So if that confused anyone, I apologize. But I think those two would interact. The longer it takes to weigh in on a permanent, make a decision on a permanent CEO hire, the longer you have an interim. Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
But let's talk for a moment, because I do think Mr. Cumber's right. It informs the search process about what type of candidate we are looking for in a permanent CEO. Chair will start the discussion, but then I want to open it up. And Ms. Green, you just need to come off mute when you're ready to jump in here, okay?
Sure.
Thank you. I firmly believe that this search should be for a strategic CEO and not a transition CEO. I don't think there's any assurance that there's going to be any immediate or near-term or intermediate or perhaps even long-term decision on privatization of JEA. And I don't think that we should let our decisions be governed by the speculative nature of that conversation. We need to hire a CEO, in my opinion, that can take JEA forward into the future. And it needs to have a strategic vision for JEA into the future and how it will serve our customers and all of our stakeholders. I think it would be a mistake, in my opinion, and I'm only one voice here, to hire someone and tell them that they are a short-timer. I'm not sure what quality of candidate you can get if you tell them that, by the way, we want to hire you to captain this ship, but we're planning to run it aground. That doesn't make sense to me. So from my perspective, at least, I believe the search firm should be given the direction of seeking a strategic CEO. And with that, I'll yield to the floor, and I'll just start with Ms. Flanagan. I'd love to hear her thoughts as well.
I think our decision on the search firm is an important one, and I'm respectful of the ability to generate savings, and while I'm appreciative of fiscal responsibility, I'm not certain that the savings between $80,000 and $160 warrants the exclusion of other potential vendors which may have more experience or greater likelihood of bringing us a qualified CEO with specific industry experience. That's not to say that ZRG wouldn't be at the top of the qualified list of comparative consideration. It's just difficult to know that in isolation today.
So you would be inclined to accept the additional time required for an RFQ among firms?
I would be curious if in a shorter period of time we could understand what the landscape in this industry represents and what statistics are publicly available. I think that information could be obtained even before beginning an RFP process.
Okay. Mr. Cumber, I sense from your earlier question you may be similarly inclined.
I am, and maybe I can add some kind of color to that. I think somewhere along the line this has become a binary conversation in our community, right? Is it, do we privatize or do we not privatize? And I actually think what that fails to have people recognize is that's really not the decision path that I think we're really on. It's a question of, do you privatize, or do you, to be blunt about it, do you change the JEA charter to make it more relevant for the next 100 years? I don't think it's a question of do we privatize or just remain status quo. And so to me, that conversation affects the type of CEO we're going to bring on, because you're going to need somebody that can actually, not only have the vision, but can execute that vision. The reason why I said I'm a little, I was, kind of thinking through as to whether or not we're thinking about this the right way. And maybe I'm being aspirational here, but there's a thought that, the other thing to be clear about, this board has still not taken a position on privatization, right? There's been no vote at this board. There's a letter that was sent to the CEO to initiate a process. But I think if this board were to make a decision and say, look, status quo is not the option, right? That we have to also equally be focusing on how JEA stays relevant, to ensure that it's to me, the employees, protecting employees means making sure JEA continues to grow. Do you have an interim CEO that can help you get down that path to help bring clarity as the type of CEO you want, right? Because to me, the type of CEO that we want a search firm to recruit is somebody that's going to be committed to JEA for years. And so that's what I'm trying to think through right now is to what Ms. Flanagan said, are we rushing into something that we don't have clarity ourselves on what direction we want to go in? And I think we find ourselves sitting here today because we have rushed into certain discussions that we weren't ready to necessarily have as a board. And I'd hate for us to have an opportunity right now to take a step back and really think through what this board as a group wants to do, and yet we've picked a search firm and haven't had that discussion.
Well, in fairness, we haven't picked a search firm yet.
We have a motion to pick a search firm.
We have a recommendation and a motion in support.
Correct.
Yes. Well, there's nothing that precludes us from having that discussion. We can certainly have that discussion in the context of this motion. Or if you'd like, we can table the motion. From my perspective, I agree that the nature of the candidate and our goals for the candidate will influence the search. And I think it's incumbent upon us, and we're obligated in engaging that search firm to define the parameters of the candidate. So if I understand Mr. Cumber's comments, you'd like to have that discussion prior to engaging and giving direction to a search firm. Is that fair?
I think that's fair.
And Ms. Flanagan, you're concerned there are other candidate firms out there that we should look at. If we can do so on an expedited basis, the existing contract with CRG shouldn't be a determining factor.
I think there's still a pathway in better understanding the landscape of the industry that could still yield a result where we go with ZRG under the existing agreement, but in a more informed manner of what the alternatives could have been.
Fair enough. Reverend Newville?
Mr. Chairman, I think we have to remember we're only here because our CEO stepped down. So we didn't rush it.
Right.
It just came upon us. And so we have to do our best to make sure that we move forward in a thoughtful way. And I kind of concur that I think all of us are off guard to a certain extent. And how we move forward is going to be very, very important. So.
Well, in today's news cycle, it seems like years ago, but it was only 10 days ago that Mr. McElroy resigned. So let me ask this. Is there support for a motion to table the engagement of CRG, or to withdraw that motion in favor of soliciting, and let me just interrupt my own thought. Ms. Hires, could that process be expedited? Can we not dictate to the firms that might be interested in this engagement response within, say, 3 weeks, so that we could reconvene 4 weeks from now and make an informed decision on the right firm?
I'll have to check. We can ask for a specific time limit, but then I'll also check with our procurement department to understand exactly how that would work with the responses, and do we have to give them a necessary time to respond and prepare the
There's
information.
no exception for professional services agreement that would allow us to go outside of that. I'm looking at both Ms. Brooks and Ms. Hires.
Yeah, JEA does operate under a procurement code, but this board can waive provisions of the procurement code. So if you wanted it on an accelerated basis, this board has that option to do that. You know, if you don't follow the timelines that are established in the procurement code, but you as the board can waive those specific timeframes of the procurement code.
Okay, that's good information. Ms. Hires?
I was about to say, thank you, Ms. Brooks.
Well, then let me, because I sense that the board is headed in this direction, before I say anything else. Ms. Green, I'm sorry. I don't have your pretty face in front of me, so I forget you're there. Did you have anything else to add to this discussion?
Just that I agree with all of the fellow board members. What we don't want to do is continue to rush decisions. I think we need to be well informed, and I think we need to table this for the next board meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Green. So Chair will ask for a motion to table the engagement of ZRG.
So moved.
Do we want to table, I'm sorry.
Or withdraw it?
My preference would be to withdraw versus tabling the discussion. So
Yep.
can we get a motion to withdraw?
Well, she can just withdraw it.
Withdraw.
Just move it.
Thank you.
And agreed by the second? Okay. Motion to engage COG is withdrawn then. Let's continue this discussion for one moment more on the RFQ issue. Chief Legal Officer Brooks has noted that this board has the ability to waive provisions of the procurement code that would otherwise mandate certain timelines associated with an RFQ.
Correct.
Okay. Is it possible, Ms. Hires, in your experience in this industry, to accelerate that so that we would have responses from interested firms 3 weeks out, so that this board might act at its May meeting?
I'll have to check with our procurement officer.
No, you can waive that. We're waiving that. We're talking about waiving that. Talking about the firms. Can the firms respond to something?
Well, I would imagine they would, because I know I have done that in the private sector, but I have never asked for that here in the public sector.
Okay. You're confident we don't have any issue with procurement board issues if this board takes action to waive any requirements?
That's correct.
Okay. All right. And you believe that they will be responsive?
Yes, I do believe they will be responsive.
All right. So I sense that we're heading in a direction of a motion to solicit an RFQ from interested firms to serve as a search firm for a permanent CEO. Did we want to take that up before we talk about the parameters that we will give to them? Are we okay with that?
May
The
I ask,
RFQ?
may I
Yeah.
ask a clarifying question?
Sure.
If we proceed with the RFQ, will the existing agreement in place with ZRG still be a viable pathway for us to consider in the population of all choices?
Yes, it would be.
Mr. Cumberland?
One other question. Chair of the comp committee is still Ms. Flanagan?
It is. That's her chagrin.
So maybe as part of that, knowing that we have to abide by sunshine law and we can't have these conversations in between board meetings, as part of that, maybe we can designate Ms. Flanagan to work with Ms. Hires on any questions that come up through the RFQ process, issuing it, et cetera.
I'm in favor of that. Anything that's not the chair. Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Appreciate your volunteering. You can punch him later.
She just kicked me.
Yeah. Okay, so then, do you need a motion for an RFQ and waiver of any pertinent provisions of procurement code on the timeline?
Yes, for the professional services agreement, RFQ for the CEO of and managing director of JEA, that notice and response timeframes would be waived from the procurement code requirements to accelerate the ability to get qualified applicants to apply through the RFQ process. Got it?
Nice dictation of the motion. Did someone want to make that motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, thank you. I'll take that from Mr. Cumber. So the motion, without reciting it precisely as, as Ms. Brooks did, is essentially to solicit RFQ and waive any applicable provisions on time and response that are in the procurement code.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. Any discussion on that point? Ms. Green, you just jump right in here.
Will do.
Okay. All right. Then I'll ask for a vote on that motion. All in favor, so indicate by saying aye.
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 Ms. Green, can you give us a vote?
Ms.
You have my vote.
Okay,
Thank you. Okay. So Ms. Hires, if you'll proceed on that basis, seeking expedited RFQ and work with Ms. Flanagan on any questions to all those interested firms. Let's talk then on the issue of parameters that we'll be prescribing to the selected search firm. I'd like to, and I'll just open it up for comment. I sort of gave my thoughts a moment ago, but I'd like to hear from others. Reverend Newbill?
Start on that end.
Start on that end, okay. Yes, sir. Respect my elders. Ms. Hires?
May I be excused?
You don't like sitting up here?
No, I don't.
Yes. Thank you. Appreciate your help on this.
You're more than
Thank you so much.
And your brutal honesty.
Yes. Ms. Flanagan?
I think what's important for me is to receive some quantifiable benchmarks that will help us assess the characteristics and capabilities of the search firm in particular. That would be my starting point.
How about parameters on a CEO candidate in terms of the instruction that we would give to the search firm?
I think it's going to be critically important to demonstrate knowledge and expertise of the industry specific to JEA. I think experience in a chief executive or comparable level of leadership authority within an organization is important as well.
Mr. Cumber?
I echo what Board Member Flanagan mentioned. I would add to that we are, very unique from the standpoint of not being an IOU, and so understanding, kind of government interaction and having performed that, I think, would be important. I'd also like to have candidates be able to demonstrate that they have been part of directly involved with the strategic review of, a utility that's either the electric and or water side. I think it'd be difficult to find someone with both, just given the nature of that we are unique from that standpoint. But I do believe that we immediately have to start focusing on our strategic plan moving forward, and having somebody who could help us do that is important. And I'll come back to me. I may have a couple others.
Sure. Keep thinking about it. Reverend Newbill?
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, I would think that they would have to, we have to send a message that they would be the face of JEA, especially with what's going on. And so we got a community that before they get here already in confusion. We have a city council who have their thoughts, and then we have the board. And I think along with what other board members said, we got to remember that community piece. How do you communicate JEA to a community? And along with that, how do you expand our ability to bring more income in. You know, because from all the figures I've heard since 2008, we haven't had much growth financially, okay? And so what that means is, you know, we need a person who's able to have good vision in terms of what is going on. I mean, we know that solar is on the increase, and every time solar increases, guess what happens to electric? It decreases. And so I think when we look at it, we got to have someone who has that extraordinary ability to know what to do and say in the community and how to present JEA, but also on this side of the board, how to stay relevant, how to be visionary, and how to affect that bottom line. So, yes.
Good points. I'll go around one more time, but let me ask Ms. Green if she has anything to add. Anything to add, Ms. Green, on qualities that you would look for in a CEO so that we can give direction?
Where I am, but I think that what's very key is a strategic. Someone has to be very strategic to understand this business model, but understand if this is the right business model for JEA, but also takes into consideration the employees, the ratepayers, and our shareholders as our city council. That is, to me, as important. You want someone who has experience in the utility industry, but right now, with everything that we have going on, understanding a strategic plan that everyone agrees to, that all of our stakeholders buy in, understand, and support as a whole.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Green. So I don't believe we need a motion on the characteristics that we're looking for in a permanent CEO hire to give to Ms. Hires in her discussions with a search firm. But what I would ask that she do is take these comments from the board, distill them down into a description, and let's circulate them so that we can have them in front of us at the next board meeting. When we make a decision on search firm, we'll be able to make a decision at the same time on the charge to that search firm. This is the candidate that we're looking for. Does that work for everyone?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, and the attached to Mr. McElroy's contract is a position profile that you may want to take a look at, the very last page. And you'll see some roles and responsibilities, but one of the ones that I just saw was the strategic leadership of the organization. It was one of the very first responsibilities, but you may want to take a look through that as you're putting together the list of the characteristics.
Thank you very much, Ms. Brooks. Ms. Hires, you no doubt have this, and that'd be a good starting point. Thank you. So on the search, we all good there before we move on? Yes. Pause. Anything else on the search firm? Ms. Hires, we look forward to something from you in advance of the next board meeting in terms of the RFQ and a description of the candidate profile. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to the question of interim CEO. Based on Ms. Hires' report and some of the challenges that we face in a permanent CEO search, I would say that we are very fortunate here at JEA to have two very talented individuals who have expressed an interest in serving as interim CEO. I understand that both Ms. Dykes and Mr. Zahn have reached out to the various board members and had one-on-one conversations or expressed a desire to do so over the last several days. However, before we proceed with our deliberations as a board on their individual candidacy, I would like to invite each of them to make a brief presentation to the board, just describing their qualifications and interest in serving as interim CEO, so that we might have a public record of that, and that it might be out there in front of all of our stakeholders as the basis for a decision by this board. I appreciate that each of them have reached out and spoken individually to the directors, but I do think it is important that we make their interest and qualifications a part of the record. Following those presentations, we don't have a procedure in our bylaws for a ballot process. So the only way we can take action on an interim CEO is by motion. What that means is that we would have a motion to engage Ms. Dykes as interim CEO. It takes 4 votes of the 5 directors to carry. If she fails to receive 4 votes in favor of her candidacy as interim CEO, then we'd move to a motion to hire Mr. Zahn as interim CEO. I'm just going alphabetically, Mr. Zahn. I'm sure you've had that your whole life. So we would then move to a vote on Mr. Zahn's candidacy. If he fails to garner 4 votes, your guess is as good as mine. We'll sit here until we figure it out. But after that, I would propose that this board engage in a discussion on the contract terms. There's a template of an interim CEO contract that Ms. Brooks has prepared, but as I said, it has blanks on the name, the compensation amount, and probably should have had a blank on the term, so we can talk about that. That's how I propose we move forward with Mr. Cumber.
Mr. Chair, just one point of clarification for myself. I know we obviously had a board resignation for someone who's interested. Melissa's interested. I'm just curious, either through you or through Angie, did anybody else express interest for the interim CEO job?
The chair has received no expression of interest from anyone. Ms. Hires?
I have had no one at all.
Okay, thank you.
Good. Thank you for clarifying that. With that, I'll ask Ms. Dykes to make a brief presentation to the board about your qualifications and your desire to serve as interim CEO. Ms. Dykes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to board members about serving as interim CEO for JEA. I look forward to hopefully working with the board to support its search to identify the right candidate for the permanent CEO position. I have been in the utility business for more than 20 years. I started my career working on how to get infrastructure services to the poorest areas in the world. Think tanker trucks for clean water delivery instead of being able to turn on the tap. Throughout my career, I have worked on as a senior utility executive, a project developer, an investment banker, and a financial advisor. You as board members know me as CFO, but in addition to finance at JEA, I am responsible for corporate strategy, our supply chain, fleet, facilities, utility locators, and emergency preparedness. My team has 215 people, and I'm responsible for more than 10% of JEA employees overall. Almost 6 years ago, I chose JEA because I had the opportunity to work with great people on a really important mission to serve our community. I've grown to love this organization that's welcomed me like a family, and as a family, we care for and watch out for each other, and that's why safety will always be our most important priority, and will continue to be our most important priority through this transition period. I look forward to building on the great work that JEA has done in our community, serving not only the 1 million people that we do serve across 4 different counties, but also for the 2,000 people that work here and their families. Our business and industry are changing faster than ever in history. In 2012, we crafted a comprehensive strategic plan, and we've updated that plan every year since. Our core utility sales are challenged, and when they're challenged, we have 2 main strategies to combat falling usage. Our first strategy is to cut costs out of the business, and our second strategy is to diversify our revenue. Our cost-cutting initiatives over the past 6 years have been extraordinary. Our employees' efforts have saved our customers and community more than $1 billion on a present value basis. It's critical that even during an interim period, we not take our foot off the gas. It's critical that we leverage our changing world and the power of technology to further reduce expenses. Our growing revenues initiatives have had more mixed results. We have grown recurring non-core revenue by almost $10 million since 2012. And now it's a really exciting time that the winds seem to be shifting. In the public conversation, as Board Member Cumber mentioned, about the sale of JEA, the options do seem to have boiled down to this binary option of sell or don't sell JEA. But in my opinion, that's not the right question. It's comparing JEA as we exist today with all the constraints that come with being governmentally owned and all the constraints that we live with in our charter to a private sector entity that might come in and operate without those constraints. And it's not a fair comparison. There is a third option, with the support of our owner to loosen the reins on JEA so we have the freedom to do the things I know we can do to shore up our declining revenues if we're given the chance. The freedom to do the things that we do best as a vital part of our community. As board members, you already know how extraordinary our employees are and how dedicated to the community they are each and every day. You've seen our champion linemen today, and there are 1,000 more extraordinary stories, from small things like serving breakfast at a soup kitchen to large things like reporting to work after Hurricane Irma when this employee's home was underwater. Our employees inspire and humble me every day. And in those employees, we have a tremendous resource. We have 2,000 smart, creative, brave people who, with the support of our community, can unleash their entrepreneurial spirit to make this organization even more successful. I look forward to working with community leaders to support their efforts to answer critical questions for our community, but also to shift the conversation into one that is both gentler and more fairly considers the value that we can bring by fully executing our corporate strategy with their support. I look forward to working with the board on important strategic questions around how we can more fully maximize the value of JEA in a rapidly changing market by growing our offerings to our customers. And I look forward to working with our employees on exciting new opportunities to showcase the tremendous value that we can bring to our community. Hurricane season begins in 45 days, and it's likely to overlap this interim period. During the last 2 hurricanes, our employees accomplished tremendous feats in restoration, including restoring power faster after Hurricane Irma than any other major city in Florida. We learned a lot during those 2 storms, and we're putting in place plans to continuously improve our preparedness for storm season. My leadership of our emergency preparedness team, our employees' experience, and my experience over the last 2 hurricanes have equipped me to lead JEA through whatever comes our way. I do appreciate your consideration for the interim CEO role and will work to continue to grow JEA, to calm the waters, and to bridge to the permanent leadership structure that's selected by the board while continuing to provide safe, reliable, and affordable electric, water, sewer, district energy, natural gas, and fiber service to the million people that we serve. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Ms. Dykes. Mr. Zahn. Well, you've moved. You used to be over there. Now you're over here.
Chair and board members, thank you for the opportunity to say a few words. And first thing I want to point out is I don't really view this as myself versus Ms. Dykes. We've spoken actually personally, and not only have I reached out to each one of the board members, but we want, and I would think Melissa would echo this, that there is a level of unity and a common purpose here. Over the weekend, I have had a chance to reach out to each one of you and outline the rationale that led to my decision on Friday. Additionally, we reviewed my applicable experience, my constructive observations of the current state of affairs, and a vision for JEA's future. I hope each of you understand the merit of that conversation, and I don't plan to regurgitate it here. My biography is available publicly, and as discussed, this was not an easy decision. It is one that I ultimately made with my wife because it is a dramatic departure in my personal and professional career, and it is in the spirit of aiding a community in need of leadership. The past 6 months have been an interesting journey for me. It is a time for, first, Paul McElroy reached out with the prospect of me lending my infrastructure and business expertise to JEA in the form of a board advisory position. Second, I was honored by a mayor with a nomination. And third, City Council vetted and unanimously ratified that appointment. In parallel, during the 6 months, I thoroughly investigated the financial and operational and market affairs of JEA. In addition, I watched a public discourse around a crown jewel asset of this city become toxic and unproductive. It is time for our bridge city to start building bridges. It is time for our organization, starting with the CEO and working in unison with this board, to take a leadership and ownership position in the conversation of JEA's future. Most important, I believe JEA leadership should suppress the impulse to prematurely discuss and decide on the notion of sell versus don't sell. Instead, let us focus on building consensus. Let us focus on understanding and creating a framework around what the purpose and role of JEA is in the community, a vision and a strategy of what JEA might be as a utility for the future of Jacksonville. JEA is in fact a valuable and critical part of the fabric of Jacksonville. Our number one stakeholders are our customers and the employees that serve them. And no matter what, our strategy should understand that and underscore that. Our customers deserve a focused team that is dedicated to provide the electric and clean water services for which they pay. JEA employees deserve a stable workplace where their safety and quality of life is ensured. The affairs of the past 4 months have been enlightening for all, I'm sure. The public discourse has surfaced actually some important issues, but it has also instilled fear and confusion. It is time for the leadership of JEA to openly and without defense discuss the opportunities and threats to our business. We must be more deliberate. We must communicate clearly and honestly to our stakeholders, and we must complete thoughtful analysis before attempting to answer highly complex strategic questions. In fact, JEA must have a plan to navigate the changing marketplace for a vertically integrated utility, and currently, after my review, I don't believe we have one. If chosen as CEO, my pledge is as follows. It is to aid our community in building bridges and working together. My first step would be to consult with the City Council and Mayor. I will immediately advocate to all policymakers that the conversation of privatization and sell versus don't sell be halted so that the customers and employees may return to the environment of stability. Second, I will build consensus around the purpose, role, and value of JEA in the community, much like the framework concept that I alluded to in my previous comments in the March 20th board workshop. And third, I will communicate in a concise and deliberate manner the impacts to our organization and its stakeholders in the future prior to any action. Misalignment of stakeholders in board and management and employees can be paralyzing and destructive factor to any organization. In contrast, unity in purpose and vision can propel individuals and collectives to accomplish unimaginable achievements. JEA, because of its unique structure as an independent authority, I believe today stands as a utility capable of becoming a national role model for the electric, water, and essential services industries. As a professional investor who has principled billion-dollar portfolios for over 2 decades, as well as as an individual with over a decade of true chairman and CEO experience navigating shareholder alignment and board management issues, I believe that my experience and vision are uniquely suited to work with all employees in the board and the policymakers to collectively navigate the next steps of JEA's future. And to that end, one of the first steps that I would look at is I believe that the current organization structure of how a CEO has 9 direct reports, 7 direct reports to a board of directors, and 20 shareholders is almost too much for a CEO to do to navigate in light of all of the strategic conversations. And what I would look at is effectively creating more of a COO and president role that would help to create stability in the current day-to-day operations, while a CEO works with the shareholders board and the employees and many of the employee representatives to garner that consensus on the role and purpose of JEA in the community. Appreciate the time. I have actually handed out a one-page. I like one-pagers. Certainly behind that is a far more extensive plan. It is a transition management plan that outlines what I would estimate to be about a 6 to 12-month process. It starts with listening and asking questions of our leaders. First and foremost, this board. Second, with our employees. Third, with our city council. And fourth, with our mayor. And then I believe there are some other important stakeholders that we need to listen to and understand their perspective on the position of JEA in the community. I'm not going to go through this entire slide. I hope that it's self-evident that there's some thought behind what I think the meaningful steps and milestones around a 6 to 12 month transition, upon which at the end, I believe to Mr. Cummer and Ms. Flanagan's points, you'll have at least a framework, you'll have a stable environment upon which to design a scorecard for a permanent CEO that and be able to give them a mandate on how to move the asset forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Zahn. I appreciate that. I believe every director's had an opportunity to speak with Mr. Zahn and Ms. Dykes individually, so I don't want to engage in a lengthy question session. But I do have one question, Mr. Zahn. This is a full-time position. I know that you're currently engaged full-time with your current business. Are you in a position and prepared to step away from Pascal Partners and serve full-time?
I am.
Okay, thank you.
I will have to, obviously, pending the decision here, I'll have to make that effective, but yes.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Reverend Newbill, any question for Mr. Zahn or Ms. Dykes?
No, I think I'm satisfied.
Thank you very much. Ms. Flanagan?
I have no further questions.
Mr. Cumber?
Through the chair, do both candidates intend to apply for the permanent CEO position?
Mr. Zahn?
I'm unaware as I said, that I have a plan that's 6 to 12 months long that would outline what the scorecard of that permanent CEO role would be. Should my skill sets and capabilities line up with that scorecard, certainly I would intend on pursuing.
Ms. Dykes? Ms. Dykes?
I think that's an important question and one that requires careful consideration between me and my family, and one that I'm not prepared to respond to at this meeting.
Okay.
Ms. Green, any questions of Mr. Zahn or Ms. Dykes? We lose her. Ms. Green? Well, this can make a 4-vote minimum more challenging.
I did have one follow-up question while we're
Mr. Cumber.
waiting on my screen. There was a start to this conversation, and I do appreciate both of you making time over the weekend. Is there a role for the other in the way you if you were to become interim CEO?
Ms. Dykes?
I have spent some time with Mr. Zahn, particularly over the past couple of days, and I really admire his vision and his background. He's got strengths and skill sets that would surely be an asset to JEA, and it would be a shame for us to not find some way for us to be able to work together and bring his strengths for the benefit of our community.
Thank you, Ms. Dykes. Mr. Zahn?
During my orientation with the senior leadership team, I obviously have had a chance to spend quite a bit of time with Ms. Dykes as well as over the last number of days, and absolutely I'd envision her as one of the senior leaders continuing to help drive not only the day-to-day operations of the business, but also be a key contributor to the strategic and planning process of this organization.
Thank you, Mr. Zahn. Great question, Mr. Cumber. Melissa, can you text her?
He's responding now. It has not come through yet, but you should have an answer shortly.
Ms. Green, did you have any questions for the two interim CEO candidates? No. Okay. I think before we move to a vote, the chair would like to recess for 5 minutes, seriously 5 minutes, see if we can get Ms. Green back on and give opportunity to people to visit the restroom. So we'll be in recess for 5 minutes.
I think that's it. I think
Can
so.
you hear me?
Are you back? Technology, 5 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, we'll reconvene. Before we take a vote on the interim CEO position, a couple of matters of note. As I noted at the outset, we do not have a provision in the JEA bylaws for voting by ballot. We can only vote by motion, and on the advice of the chief legal officer, we'll vote on the two candidates one after the other. If Ms. Dykes does not receive 4 votes, then we'll move to a vote on Mr. Zahn's candidacy. Second, Ms. Green is traveling internationally. She can hear us and has so indicated by text. However, we're unable to receive her verbal communication. So,
Chairman, can you hear me?
yes! Oh, we're so glad you're back. Okay, forget what I just said. All right, Ms. Green, before we move to a vote, I want to make sure you had an opportunity to ask any questions of the two candidates for interim CEO.
No, I don't have any questions.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, I'll ask for a motion to engage Ms. Dykes as interim CEO.
So moved.
Thank you, Reverend Newbold. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. Is there any other discussion on the motion to engage Ms. Dykes as interim CEO of JEA? These will be on contract terms to be determined. Hearing none, then I'll ask for a vote, and it'll be a roll call vote. I'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Cumber.
No.
Ms. Flanagan.
No.
Ms. Green.
No.
Reverend Newbill.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So that motion fails to carry for lack of 4 votes. We'll move on to a motion for the engagement of Aaron Zahn as the interim CEO. Do I hear a motion for the engagement of Mr. Zahn?
So moved.
Thank you, Reverend Newbill. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Flanagan. So once again, we'll do a roll call vote, and we'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Cumber.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
may I make a friendly proposed amendment to the current motion on the floor?
Yes.
If we proceed on a path of changing the strategic vision and appointing Mr. Zahn in an interim CEO capacity, I think that would be done with the board believing that the next, up to 12 months are still going to be spent considering who the ultimate ideal CEO is for JEA moving forward for the long term. It would be really important to me in that interim period that we retain Ms. Dykes. As the Finance and Audit Committee Chair, I have had a tremendous amount of experience and respect for her capabilities. I think that she has great institutional knowledge and is truly committed to JEA, its stakeholders, its employees, and the community. And it's really important to me that she would be retained. And I would like to modify the motion such that it also provide an offer of contract employment for the same duration of time.
For the record, Ms. Dykes does not currently have a contract with the JEA to serve as CFO. The only person with a contract is former director and CEO, former managing director and CEO Paul McElroy. So the request for a friendly amendment directed to Director Newbill is that the motion be to engage Mr. Zahn as interim CEO and to engage Ms. Dykes as the CFO, both under contract. Correct?
That's correct.
Accept that friendly amendment?
Yes.
So motion as amended is to engage Mr. Zahn and Ms. Dykes both under contract. So open the floor for discussion. Mr. Cumber?
Yeah, through the chair, Ms. Flanagan, I appreciate you saying that. I'm wondering if we should take it a step further and think about whether Ms. Dykes' role should be elevated when we would offer her to stay during that same period of time. And given the fact that both candidates, when I asked if there was a role for the other, if they were to become interim CEO, both answered yes. Obviously, it would be up to Ms. Dykes, but my view would be is we would elevate her role as opposed to keeping her as CFO. And I open that just to get any other thoughts from board members.
Mr. Zahn, I'm sorry, Reverend Newell?
I was going to say, one of the things Mrs. Zahn stated in conversation and today was that he felt there should be a role, I can't remember, COO?
I believe it would be in a.
To give him opportunity to exercise his position, outside and with the frontier. So I heard it. I'm not quite sure, but I heard it somewhere.
So,
which would elevate the CFO position.
thank you. So let me make sure I understand sort of where you're going, Mr. Cumber. It's that you would be looking to retain Ms. Dykes in a role similar to that described by Mr. Zahn in his transition plan in a position as COO, and keep the position of CFO, but have it filled by someone else. I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, no, so yeah, I don't know what the description was in the transition plan, so I think separate from that, I think Ms. Dykes made a good point in her presentation that we're 45 days away from a hurricane hitting, or hurricane season starting, sorry. I'm not a weather person, so please don't take what I say literally. And so I do believe there is I wasn't necessarily focused whether it's a COO role, a chief strategy officer role, something like that. I think, Mr. Newbill, your comment about COO would probably make sense, given the fact that she has been at JEA for 6-7 years?
Almost 6 years.
6 years. And I think that's an important consideration because I think there are two parts to what we talked about today, right? There's the operating JEA, and there's the determining what the new JEA needs to look like in order to stay relevant. And I think both of them as a team could do that.
So the motion as amended is to engage both Mr. Zahn and Ms. Dykes under contract, terms to be determined. So I'm not sure that we need to assign the title at this point, but if we're talking about creating a new position, then maybe we do need to discuss that. So if we're really trying to just say secure her services under contract, we can work on the title. But if we're creating something new, then I hesitate to say it's that easy.
I would hope that we wouldn't raise her position without raising her pay.
Well, she wouldn't argue with that.
Yeah. I mean, it wouldn't make sense to me.
Well, in my view is I think the board needs to be clear that if this were to happen, our view is not for her to stay in the CFO role, but to be elevated to a new role that on the org chart today does not exist. And there is no other title on the org chart today that I would feel would encumber the responsibilities that we would be looking for her to take over.
Let me ask the board, Ms. Green, you haven't had an opportunity to weigh in on this discussion. Let me pause and ask you for your thoughts. The current motion is to engage Mr. Zahn and Ms. Dykes under contract to JEA as C-suite officers.
My initial response is that you're going to tie an interim CEO to a structure that has not even had the opportunity to assess the organization. So I'm not sure if addressing an elevation of our current CFO or interim CEO should even be on the table without making the decision of the interim first, and that person being included in that conversation.
I think those are good points. I just want to make sure no one's under the misimpression that we've had an affirmative vote to engage Mr. Zahn as interim CEO yet. That motion's still on the table. So the question of who will be the interim CEO has not yet been resolved.
Correct.
So with that qualification, your point is well taken, Ms. Green. We're joining them buddy here, perhaps on a presumption.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, Chairman, they are getting ready to close the door on the flight, so I'm sure they're going to make me disconnect the call. Will there be further discussion prior to the vote?
Let me ask that question. Any other thoughts or comments? It may be, Mr. Cumber, that the vote here is to extend contracts, the terms to be negotiated between the candidates, Ms. Brooks, and the chair, if you'll delegate that authority, to be ratified at the next board meeting. That would allow some latitude in defining the term, the compensation, and the title, if you will, and ensuring that we, to Ms. Green's point, to ensure that we end up with a structure that both candidates are comfortable with.
I do feel through the chair, we do have to ask Ms. Dykes if she'd be open to that, because we do have to vote on this, and
Right.
it could affect votes.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah.
I would be open to that structure.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I was getting to that. Ms. Flanagan.
Nothing further.
Okay, Ms. Green, unless you had something else, we'll vote before they close the door on you. Anything
I
else?
have no further comment.
Okay. So the motion has been made and seconded that we engage Mr. Zahn as interim CEO and place Ms. Dykes under contract in a position to be determined with the compensation and additional terms of the contract to be negotiated and presented to the board at our May meeting, or before. That's the motion. I'll ask for a roll call vote again, and again, we'll go in alphabetical order. Mr. Cumber,
Yes.
Ms. Flanagan,
Yes.
Ms. Green,
Yes.
Reverend Newbill,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. Motion carries unanimously. So the last action item then for today is we've been told by our bond counsel that we need a resolution clarifying the authority provided to the interim managing director and CEO of JEA and the proposed. Did you make copies? No.
I did make copies. They were supposed to have been distributed, but I'm not sure if they got in the folder.
It's in our
or
orange
not.
folder.
You get it?
Yes.
So in your orange folder, be it resolved by JEA as follows, except as may otherwise be expressly provided, the interim managing director and chief executive officer of JEA has all powers of the managing director and chief executive officer of JEA while serving as interim managing director and chief executive officer, including but not limited to the power to enter into all contracts and to make all determinations that the managing director and chief executive officer of JEA is authorized to enter into and to make respectively. This resolution will take effect immediately upon adoption. Do I have a motion to adopt the resolution as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Director Cumber, second by Reverend Newbill. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Ms. Green, did you vote on the resolution for authority?
I'm sorry, ask that again?
The resolution granting authority to the interim equal to the authority that the permanent CEO has.
Yes.
Okay, so motion carries unanimously. I have nothing else on the agenda. Is any other business to come before the board?
Don't
I'll
we
let
have
you
a
speak.
contract?
On the contract to be negotiated and ratified was the motion.
Perfect, got it, okay.
I'll recognize you after we adjourn. Anything else for the board? Okay, meeting is adjourned. Mr. Zahn.
Thank you very much for the
You can
comment.
just give comments.
I'm sorry?
You can just give comments. It's not official business.
This may be a matter that the board want
You
to
have something?
consider.
Well, maybe it's something that the board may want to consider, so we can't be in a position that we're adjourned. So could you reopen the meeting?
I'm sorry.
Meeting reopened.
I apologize.
Okay.
You're resigning already?
It was. If so, you got to move back to the other side.
Blah, blah. So in the order of authority, at what point in time, given that at the last board meeting, the board ratified a resolution to place authority as an interim CEO with Ms. Dykes through today, there's currently no contract in place with myself and obviously Ms. Dykes.
You're in. Terms to be determined.
So that the
You're the
authority
guy.
starts today.
It started 30 seconds ago.
Okay, that's what the clarifying point I'm asking the question to.
No,
Okay.
we don't know what we're paying you. Could be a little.
Yeah, that's fine.
Small amount.
As I said, I'm
Don't say
not
that's
doing this for
fine.
the money.
All right.
Don't ever say that's
Anything
fine
else
with
to
the
come
money.
before the board? Reverend Newbill?
No, I'm fine.
Ms. Green, thank you so much. Appreciate your participation. We're adjourned.